Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's week we're gonna do Spider-Man. So this one's not gonna be as hard, but it actually looks pretty difficult right after that. So we're gonna do, of course, we are gonna, get our shapes going. We're gonna make sure that on our shapes we're gonna make them Lambert so they don't match with that. We're gonna get ourselves transparency, make a whole bunch of copies to brighten this up. Since we have this ball, let's start with the head. The head isn't that difficult. All you really have to do is just get circle or cylinder, whatever you prefer. What I do is shrink it down to the size of his forehead, move it up, and then what I do is basically do this and do that, and then move it to a tilt because you can see his head is on a tilt. So there we go. That's probably just how his head's gonna go. Since we have it, let's do the chest. The chest actually won't need to, need a whole bunch of shapes. So we really just need the same thing we did last week, 2 cubes on slant. So, let's here. If you're wondering, the neck doesn't really need to, be modeled. Considering how big his chest is, it's probably going to eat up most of that part of his neck. We can put in the neck later, but right now, it's not really what we need right now. Right now, we're just getting the main parts in. So let's make the chest. The chest is very, big and broad. So what we're trying to aim for is for the chest to, if you can look at the model, his shoulder overlaps with his chest. So we're trying to, hit that margin. Right now, I think we're pretty close to what we need right now. Now, we can do the same thing for the bottom, except this one's going to be a lot smaller. So let's grab ourselves this piece, and then shrink it down, and then move it into position. This is going to be his bottom torso. So we pretty much have that. Next is actually the hands. I know I've said hands are actually pretty easy. This part is actually going to be kind of difficult, considering his fingers are completely different. But still, same process idea. Take a cube, move it here. But this is going to be different once we get to the high poly. I'm just going to say right now, the high poly is actually going to be a little more easier than most models. Why? It's because the fingers are more defined. With more defined fingers, it's actually going to be a lot easier to reach the definity. Where all we really need to do is just get this finger out and these two on an angle like this. We can set that. As you can see there, if you can look in the model, there is that tiny area of a shoulder. We're actually going to use a cylinder for this part. So of course, make sure it's a Lambert, because the reason I'm using Lambert, if you haven't seen my previous videos, you'll know that the shapes will act, when you put the thing on, it'll actually, when you put it in a shape, will have the print of the photo on the shape. So the way you counter that is basically just make it a different shade. What we're gonna do, just try to bring this upwards and try to angle it so that it connects with most of that shoulder. So right now what we're doing is trying to angle it and move it down to an area we can get it. Right now I think this is where we need it. Next is his other hand. Considering this model is actually less complicated than most other models we've been doing so far in this series, it's pretty interesting how we've gone from very difficult models like Donald Duck to somewhat simpler here. The muscles we'll get to in the high poly if you were thinking that. So now, all we really have to do here is kind of the same process. Shrink down a cylinder for, the shoulders, and we'll actually bring another cube. What's different is how this hand is. It's less defined and will actually be a lot more difficult once we go into the high poly, because what is difficult about high poly is that you need a lot of defined, less detail like things. Like this could possibly be easier, but I'm not going to count on it. let's bring this here, shrink it drastically to fit, how his hand looks. But we're going to do it differently. Instead of it being on a slant like most other shapes, we're actually going to pull it like this on its top. And what we're going to do is just simply move it like this. And now, this model is actually going to be a lot faster. The legs. The legs are probably a part that isn't really as difficult to, basically model. What's really we're going to do is just get some cylinders. And what we're really just going to do is have these cylinders a lot wider and bigger just to fit how big his legs are. So let's just move these into here. And what we're going to do is just make them longer and bigger. So let's start with its length. The length is actually going to be a lot harder to hit, considering that the model is going to be, what we have to do for the model is considering that we need to rotate it and make it wider. So we have two variables to think about as we're modeling. That's our first leg, and we're just simply going to Control D it, move it here, and do the same idea here. Now, if you remember last week, we didn't really do Deadpool's elbows, where we waited until part 2 to insert them. This time, we're not going to do the same mistake. What we're just going to do is put the knees in right now. So, as we are modeling this, you can see how his knees are connected. So what we're going to try to hit is his, leg. We're trying to hit it with his knee. So right now we're just trying to make it long enough to reach his knee. So there we go. Now we just simply gotta grab one of these and move it down to here. And then we can make it as small as we want. This should be probably the size we're going to aim for, and we'll do the same thing for the other leg. Let's grab one of these. This part's not really going to need a lot more thinking. It's just to make this a lot smaller, because you can see how his leg on this side is actually smaller by proportion. So what we're going to do is bring it like this and just make it longer. A key difference we're going to see in this model than others is how it's, has more defined and simpler shapes that we can easily hit. And then we just Control D and bring it here. You can see how it's bigger here is by perspective. So what we're really just going to do is rotate this onto its top side. And this part's actually going to be a lot difficult once we get into more of the high poly structure, where we have to, define the calves and everything. But for right now, for the basic, we're just going to make this like that. Next is, this part. It's not so difficult. We just got to grab some spears, shrink it down, and make it longer. Normally, this would be a cylinder jump, but right now I think a circle would be a lot more useful. Just because with a circle, although it's a lot harder to do things with, it has more of a round shape, which we're aiming for in the entirety of the model. Now, if we hop out, there, ladies and gentlemen, this video is actually a lot shorter than most other videos we've done. This is a basic Spider-Man model. Part 2 will be coming out tomorrow for his, realization. This model was a lot more basic and simple, and I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching. Love you guys, and bye.